Hey, what's up everybody, Retro Gaming Guy here. Today in this video, we're going to dive into the GameGrid 2 retro game console. So we're going to set this up, dive into it, take a tour of what it has to offer, dive into the gameplay experience, see what the performance is like, and then we'll jump back out and talk about it. So let's dive into it and get started. Alright, so we have just booted up the GameGrid 2, and right here I'm staring at the all games list. This lists 39,196 games total on this entire setup. So very impressive number there, but we have to dive into it a little bit further to see exactly where that number comes from, and make sure that there's not a ton of duplicate games here for some of these collections, because sometimes these numbers can be padded and be very misleading. So we're going to go through here, see what we have. So again, all games list, that's going to be our master list. We can actually jump into that though and take a peek as to what the layout is for all of our collections. So right off the bat, looks like we come into ZX Spectrum here. Looks like we have a text list on the right hand side. We have some info on the games on the left hand side. Looks like a still shot of maybe a screenshot of the game as well as box art. It does also tell you some information about the title. So let's go up rather than down and see how each of these looks. So we're seeing a bunch of different collections here, and it does look like we are seeing a screenshot. We also get a description for some titles, not for all titles, but it does tell us who developed each title. It gives us a little rating there, genre of the game, release date, all that good stuff. So far so good. We're going to back out of this though, and we're going to continue. We'll actually go down. So looks like the first collection here is PSP with 255 games, which seems like a really high number actually, but I would bet that PSP mini games are in here as well. So just going off of what I've seen in the past. So we do have some good titles here. God of War, Chains of Olympus, which is a great title. Tekken 6 is in here. NBA 2K19 is in here. What else do we have? All right, some Grand Theft Autos, and there we go. We're starting to see some PSP minis games in here as well. So that's kind of what I expected. Assassin's Creed. Yeah, all these are mini games here, which is fine. But definitely, usually you see those in a different collection from regular PSP, so that does make it look like there's more PSP games than there likely really are, since, obviously we have to consider the minis here, but still, mini games are pretty awesome as well. So I'm just scrolling through here, and it looks like this is mainly mini games. There are some other ones thrown in here, but definitely it looks like, again, the majority are mini games. So we'll back out. We will jump into some gameplay demos at the tail end of this video. I just want to scroll through and see what this offers first. So PlayStation is the first collection. How many titles for PlayStation? 61 games. Pretty straightforward here, it looks like. Looks like some good titles. I'm not going to go, one by one through the entire thing, but we'll get a basic idea as I scroll through here. Ridge Racer, Tekken 2 and 3 seems like, Medal of Honor. So good titles. Continuing on, Neo Geo with, how many games do we have here? 179 games for Neo Geo. And we also have some subcategories too, which is cool. We have Metal Slug in its own folder here. Let's take a look at that, because that's my favorite Neo Geo series of games. So we have a bunch of titles in here. Looks good. Don't anticipate any issues there, but we'll probably jump into some Metal Slug at the end of this. It is one of my favorite games, absolutely, for Neo Geo, but in general, love those titles. So Sinclair, ZX Spectrum here. Is that a 5 or a 6? I think that's a 5. 5,252. It's pretty impressive. I'm not too much of a fan of that necessarily, but still pretty good collection there. So now we have Sega Naomi here with, what do we have here? 5 or 6 titles? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 titles. We have Marvel vs. Capcom 2, which is a major hit for this particular collection. We also have Street Fighter Zero there. Gigawing 2, Confidential Mission. Be interested to see how that works. Capcom versus SNK. So good titles in here. Wish there were more, but 6 games is still pretty good there. Dreamcast. How many games do we have for Dreamcast? Just 9 games here. Wish this was, well, it said, did it say 9? Yeah, it says 9 there, but there's only 1, 2, 3, 4 games in here. That's weird. Alright, well, these are still good titles. I wish there were more, though. It definitely says 9 there, though. Yeah, 9 and there's 4. Okay, we'll jump in there and test that out. And I keep, actually, you'll notice that I'm going up and down on this. Whenever I try to go down, I go up. I'm just hitting the D-pad down, and it actually goes the opposite way. Not a huge deal, but kind of awkward there. Sega 32X. How many titles for Sega 32X? 37. I guess we have to start counting these because we saw what was going on there with Dreamcast. Said 9 and there were only 4. Looks like good selection here for 32X. Sega Mega Drive. How many do we have here? 1,193. Game Gear, we have 263. Genesis, we have 890. Sega Master System, we have 992. Let's take a look at that. And we also have some sub collections here. We have the Mark III and Tectoy, which is pretty cool as well. So we might even have more. I'm not sure if they factor that into their count or if they're just counting all of these and those are kind of like a bonus in there. Not entirely sure how that works out, but I promise you I'm not going to sit here and count over 900 titles to find out. So it looks like great selection of games here, and with that count, as long as it's, 100% legit, seems like we would have everything that we'd want for this collection. So I'm going to back out of Master System. SG-1000, we have 81 games. Atomic Wave, we have 7 games. Take a look at Atomic Wave. It's a pretty cool collection. Rumblefish games are good. Guilty Gear are good. Not as familiar with the other ones here, but still good to have. Nintendo DS. Looks like some good titles, though. I'm not a big DS fan myself, but I know a lot of people are. Or I don't want to say I'm not a big DS fan. I'm not a big Emulation DS fan. So how many titles in there? 25 titles. We have Pokemon Mini here with 26 titles. Game Boy Advance. Usually this is a massive collection. Yeah, 1,081. That's always the same number on most of these builds anyways. We have 598 for Game Boy Color. Nintendo 64, we have 193 games for N64. Let's take a look at that collection here. Definitely want to jump into some of these games, see what the performance is like here, because I know N64 can be really hit or miss with emulation, especially on smaller consoles like this. So I definitely got to see what we have here for N64, make sure everything's working good, or at least most of them are. So we're going to back out of this collection. Continuing on, Virtual Boy should be 20-something titles, 29 titles. Awesome. Super Nintendo, we have 1,232 titles. Original Game Boy, 993 titles. Family Computer Disk System, 229 games. NES, 2,611 games. That's a massive amount of games for NES. So let's take a look at that. I want to dive into that a little bit. So we are already seeing, it looks like, duplicates in here, which with that amount of games, there has to be a lot of duplicates. In fact, I see duplicates all over the place. 1, 2, 3 for that one. Not all of the Dungeons and Dragons are duplicates, but these two are the same. These two are the same. There's a single there, 2 here, 2 here, 2 here. Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of duplicates here in NES at least. I didn't see many in the other collections, but you could tell right off the bat, 2,611 games is a massive amount of games for NES. There weren't that many titles for NES. So Nintendo Game & Watch here, 63 or 53, I can't really tell. I think it's a 6, 63. Super Graphics, we have 6 games. CD-ROM 2 system, 2 games. PC Engine, we have 290 games. Vectrex, 71 games. MSX2, 82 games. MSX, 668 games. Let's take a look at that one. So I'm not seeing duplicates in here, really. So everything is looking good so far. So we'll back out of that one. Amiga, which is a collection that I've actually gotten into more over the last few months. A lot of really cool titles. 1,051 games in this collection. Let's take a look at that one. So again, we have some unreleased here. How many in there? Looks like a decent amount. The Untouchables Special Edition. Interesting. So a handful of games in that sub-collection there for unreleased titles, but right here, let's see. Not seeing duplicates in this collection. These are different versions, I believe, so that doesn't count. Yeah, there are some duplicates, but they are slightly different versions, I suppose. All of this looks good for the most part. All right, so definitely duplicates here and there. Commodore 64, I'm sure it's a pretty massive collection. Oh my God. Is that 4,978? The numbers are hard to actually read, but 4,978 it looks like. That's massive. Let's take a look at that. And we do have the subcategories there, or sub-collections. Let's see. So I'm not seeing duplicates here. No, there's some. Definitely some. And these, you can see, exactly the same. Alien, exactly the same. So there are duplicates in here, which makes sense, again, with a massive number like that. Atari Lynx, 103 games. Atari 7800, 64 games. Atari ST, 2,847 games. That seems quite massive. Let's take a look. We have compilations there in its own subcategory or subfolder. So there are also duplicates here. A lot of duplicates here. Okay. Atari 5200. And how many titles for that? 73, so that's not massive. Atari 800, 5,097. All right, we've got next one down, Atari 2600 here. Let's take a quick look. Everything seems pretty good there. 693 titles. Final Burn Alpha, 96 games. Arcade Classics, 953 games, which isn't massive for Arcade Classics. Let's take a peek inside here, see what we've got. So I'm not seeing duplicates in this collection. Everything seems to be pretty straightforward, which is good. Looks like a good selection of games in here. Good amount of games as well. So we have CPC here. And this is, of course, Amstrad CPC, 1,955. Favorites, which is going to be a collection you put together yourself. That's going to be where you add all your favorite titles just for easy access. And then we're back to our all games list. So this is everything on here. So I'm definitely thinking that number is padded quite a bit. 39,196. Definitely, or is that 34,196? I'm not really sure. Hard to tell. I guess if that's a 9 before the 6, then that's probably not a 9 after the 3, so 34,196. Don't love the font on here. It's just really hard to read, but definitely padded because we've seen quite a bit of duplicates in some of those collections. Not all the collections are loaded with duplicates, but seems like definitely some in there, which just kind of inflates that number falsely. Is what it is there, though. I don't necessarily think it's a huge deal. Just, take that number with a grain of salt. So we're going to jump into some demos here and let's see what the performance is like, because I'm definitely interested to see if we have any issues with like PlayStation, Dreamcast, Naomi, PSP, just because those are more demanding. And with consoles like this, we typically do see some pushback. So let's start it off with PlayStation.
Are you ready? Here we go!
Hey, Lexi!
Shall we?
Yeah, great! Go to the department store!
Alright, let's go!
Hey, no! Make it right!
That's the right way, huh?
Great!
Time bonus! I'm the man!
Yo,
wait up! Don't refuse! Come on, get in!
Yeah, great! Take me to HEB!
Alright, hold tight!
Go straight!
No, don't worry! Time bonus!
Alright guys, so the GameGrid 2, certainly jam-packed with tons of games and game collections. Now, I did mention during the tour portion of this video where we went through everything that this has to offer, that I did find a lot of duplicates for certain collections. So that does, of course, increase the total number of games included here. Just keep that in mind. Take the total number when you look at your all games list with a grain of salt, because again, duplicates obviously, does give you that total number of games, but there's obviously repeats and stuff like that. So not the most accurate way to gauge exactly how many games are truly included on here. There was also small disconnects here and there with certain collections like Dreamcast. I think it said there were 9 total games, but there were really only 4. Now, in terms of setups like this, the most important part, obviously aside from convenience, we want to have an easy, user-friendly experience here when things are advertised as plug and play, as they are here, and everything is truly plug and play. I didn't have to go in and adjust settings or anything like that. We obviously want to have, though, great performance. We want to be able to go into games and have a good experience when we try to play the games. So I found that the only shortcomings here for the most part were N64. All your early stuff, your Atari, your NES, Super Nintendo, Genesis, Master System, all that stuff, Game Gear, etc., works extremely well, to the point where I didn't even bother including it here in the gameplay portion of this video because everything just ran extremely well, as it typically does with setups like this. The disconnect I figured would be within those more advanced collections, so PlayStation, PSP, N64, Dreamcast, Sega Naomi. Those are collections that I was most concerned with. So we dove into those, and PlayStation performed extremely well. I will say there are some PlayStation titles where the soundtrack is missing. Usually that's done just as a way to cut down on the amount of space that a title takes up. So Tekken 3, for example, you'll notice there's no soundtrack there. That wasn't done in my editing for this video. That's how the game was. So it was a little strange at first, but in all honesty, does it really hinder the experience? Not too much. So just keep that in mind. If you're somebody that is going to be bothered by that, then maybe that's a deal breaker for you. But this is only a 64 gigabyte micro SD card that everything is included on here with this console. So I can understand trying to conserve on the amount of space taken up for certain titles. And PlayStation was a large collection. Same with N64. Now N64's performance was not great in my opinion. A lot of the titles had lags. They're playable, they start up, but it's not a great experience, to the point where I wouldn't recommend this entire console if your main goal is to play N64 games. If you want to dive into all the other collections, and if you get a few N64 games that work, then that should be considered an added bonus. But I wouldn't recommend this if you're solely set on playing N64 on here. It's just not going to be the best experience for N64 emulation. There are titles that work very well, but the majority of the titles do have at least some lags or delays, or in some cases audio cutouts or hiccups in the gameplay experience. We jumped into Mario Kart 64, and you can see there were points where it performed really well, and then points where it would just slow down to a crawl. So just not that perfect experience that I wish it was. PSP, I expected to have a similar experience, but in fact PSP actually performed very well. We jumped into Tekken 6, and yes, there's a little hiccup here and there, but for the most part the experience was quite good. It wasn't an experience where it left me looking for something more. For the budget here and for what you get, I think that the performance for PSP was quite good. We did see that there were more PSP minis games than straight PSP, but we know that once we go through that collection. So keep that in mind when looking at the total number of games for PSP. Dreamcast ran extremely well. What else? Sega Naomi, quite well as well. Just N64 was just that collection that just wasn't perfect. And ironically, there were a lot of games for N64. So in a perfect world, I'd like to see less total games for N64 just because of those performance issues, and more for either PlayStation or Dreamcast. I think Dreamcast could be improved on. We could see a lot more titles there because the gameplay experience, we just didn't run into as many issues as we did on N64. So makes more sense to add more of what performs well and less of what has some shortcomings. Now, this does come with two controllers. They're PlayStation style controllers. They are generic brand, so they're not top of the line by any means, but they get the job done. They're good starter controllers. If you're going to be playing on here a lot, you probably want to upgrade those at some point in time. Again, they'll get you into the games, but not the best controller by any means. I found that the buttons performed very well, but the analog sticks with like driving games or any fast-paced games, they're a little bit hard to get the perfect feel to them. So when I was making turns, I found that I was overcorrecting or just not finding the sweet spot on there because you just couldn't control like the in-between motions very well. Just is what it is. They're starter controllers, so take that into consideration here. But with this, you can also do save states. You can save your progress in your games, which is great. The resolution on here looks very good for your games. And this also has everything forced to 16:9 aspect ratio by default. Some people like that 4:3 aspect ratio. I personally, playing on modern day TVs, I like to try to force things to 16:9 where I can. There's going to be some titles that don't look as good on 16:9 aspect ratio, usually your older stuff, but here everything does look very good. So I will say that the resolution on here is really smooth, really a great experience here. Everything here is done on Emulation, which is a great way to enjoy retro game emulation. So pretty much a good experience here. So certainly take this information, weigh out the pros and cons, see if this is the right fit for you, see if this is going to include exactly what you're looking for in your retro gaming experience. If it is, I'll put a link at the description of this video. You guys can click over, get some additional information, see where you can get this, all that good stuff. Let me know though in the comment section what you thought of this setup here. Do you like the way it looks? Do you like what it offers? Let me know. That's going to do it for today though. Thank you guys so much for watching. You know the deal. If you enjoyed the content, thumbs up on the video, huge help to me here on YouTube, and of course hit the subscribe button to stay in the loop for all future videos right here on the Retro Gaming Guy YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.